All right, we're Chaf Medallah 20a. Running late, but we potter b'loi klum yefshir. We cannot get away without anything. So let's learn some Gemara. So the Gemara discussed the erasing of the ink. The Mishnah discussed the erasing of the ink. And the Mishnah discussed the beginning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussed at what point, if she says she's not drinking, when do we discard of the water, discard of the paper, and how we discard of it, and discarding of the meal offering as well. So on the topic of erasing the ink, says the Gemara as follows. An interesting little story. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel, Mishum Rabbi Meir, in the name of Rabbi Meir. So if you want to get the timeline, Rabbi Meir is towards the end of the Mishnaic era, towards the end, maybe the last or second to last generation of the Mishnaic era. Shmuel is the second generation of the Gemara's era, and Yehuda is a little bit later. So Yehuda is speaking of Shmuel, who's telling us about Rabbi Meir from an earlier generation. It's kind of the timeline, if you will. The bottom line is Rabbi Meir is speaking here. And he says, Kishayisi lamed Torah eitz Rabbi Akiva, when I studied Torah under the tutelage of Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, the one who had 24,000 students and then lost them and then rebuilt Torah with 5 students. Rabbi Meir being one of those 5 students, actually. So Rabbi Meir said, when I would study Torah under the tutelage of Rabbi Akiva, hayisi matel kankantum, I would place kankantum, a certain ingredient, which Rabbi Steinsaltz translates as sulfite, the toichad into the ink. And this helps the ink, I think it's like an adhesive of some sort, and it helps the ink not erase. It gives it longevity. So he says, when I would study Rabbi Akiva, I was a scribe, and I would put this kankantum into the ink. Rabbi Akiva never told me a thing. Okay. When I then transferred my studies from Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva being a contemporary of Rabbi Shmuel, we're following generations. Rabbi Yehuda is in the Gemara's time telling us about Shmuel at the beginning of the Gemara's time, and Shmuel's telling us what Rabbi Meir did when he studied under the generation before him, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. So first he was under the tutelage of Rabbi Akiva, and he always used this kankantum, and then when he transferred his studies to Rabbi Shmuel, Amar li, Rabbi Shmuel told me, Beni, my child, referring to a student, my child, Ma malachtecha, what do you do for work? Amarti li, I told him, Lavlar, I am a scribe. Ani, I'm a scribe. Amar li, so Rabbi Shmuel told me, Beni, my child, have a zohir, be very careful, shemalachtecha, because your work is meleches shemayim, is the work of heaven. He's a scribe, he's writing Torah, he's writing mezuzahs, he's writing tefillin, you're doing the work of heaven. And be careful, shematachser ois achas, lest you accidentally miss a word, or tatir ois achas, or add an extra word, and nimtzes atamacher v'skala olam kuloi, and with one extra letter, letter. You might add a letter or might lose a letter, and by adding or losing a letter, you, God forbid, can destroy the world. Sometimes you have a word in which the meaning is describing, say, God, and you switch one letter, and they would describe God in a terrible way. Or you added one letter and describe God in a terrible way. You can change a blessing to a curse. So be very careful with being very exact with the letters you're writing, because with one letter off, you can destroy the world. That's the language he uses to tell him how precious his work is. Okay. It still is. The process of writing Torah is the same as it was then. It takes a full year for many scribes to do a Torah. It's a serious job. That's why they're expensive for this reason. Almost paying for someone's salary for a whole year. So Rabbi Akiva didn't say anything. And then Rabbi Shmuel told him, be careful with those letters. Every letter you write is, the whole world stands on one letter which you write. Rabbi Meir. And he transfers from Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva didn't comment anything. Rabbi Shmuel said, be careful with every letter you write. So I responded to him, says Rabbi Meir, I responded to Rabbi Shmuel, my new teacher. Davar echad yeshli. I have one thing, a special ingredient, that I place into my ink. They can kantam shmoi, and this is called, this ingredient, the special ingredient that I have is called kankantum, the sulfite, which seems to be like unrelated. What is Rabbi Meir telling Rabbi Shmuel that he puts kankantum into ink have to do with Rabbi Shmuel just telling him to be careful with one letter, which is what the Gemara is going to comment, like what exactly is the meaning of the conversation. But this is the conversation as Rabbi Meir relates it. Rabbi Shmuel told me, be careful with every letter you write. And I told him, I have a special ingredient called kankantum, the sulfite. Oh, well, it's the opposite, right? Kankantum helps not erase. Well, let's see. Amar Li, Rabbi Yishmael. Shmuel is the later generation who's telling us about this conversation from the earlier generation. It's Rabbi Yishmael. Yeah, sorry. You see, one letter can change the meaning, right? Yishmael as opposed to Shmuel. So, Amar Li. So okay, Rabbi Shmuel tells me, be careful with every letter. Rabbi Meir speaking, Rabbi Shmuel tells him, be careful with every letter. And Rabbi Meir responds, I have a special ingredient called kankantum. So Amar Li, Rabbi Shmuel tells me, Rabbi Meir, is that proper to put kankantum, to put the sulfite into the ink? The Torah said, with respect to the script of the Sotah, umacha, that you shall erase that scroll into the water. And therefore we deduce from here, you have to be able to have an ink that is capable of being erased. And erasable ink, and you just put kankantum, which makes it impossible to erase. So some kind of adhesive of some sort. So again, Rabbi Steindl translates it as sulfite. Okay, so Gemara asks, my kamashmalan, what exactly is Rabbi Shmuel telling Rabbi Meir about being careful with the words? Mike Mahadale, and what's he responding? Like, what's the conversation here? I'm sorry. Yeah. But what is the meaning of what Rabbi Shmuel said to be careful with every letter, to which Rabbi Meir responds and says, I have a special ingredient called kankantum. What's the conversation going on here? So explains the Gemara. This is what Rabbi Meir tells Rabbi Shmuel in response to his telling him to be careful with every letter he writes. Right? Rabbi Shmuel said, be careful with every letter. And this is what Rabbi Meir responds. I have a special ingredient called kankantum. Meaning to say like this. Rabbi Meir meant, not only when it comes to missing letters and extra letters, that I am proficient in every single letter of Torah. Specifically, what he means here is chaseres v'yaseres are referring to certain words that could be written with one letter or not a letter. For example, the letter vav can sometimes be a vowel. That's a chayla, oi, right? So let's say the word yoser is yud vav saf resh, but you could write it yud saf resh without a vav. So he says to him, not only am I proficient as to when you're supposed to have these letters and when you're not supposed to have these letters, so don't worry about me missing any letters. But moreover, even to be concerned with a fly. The dilma asi, that perhaps while I'm writing, a fly will come, the Yosef ataga the Dalet, and the fly will land on the little protrusion of the letter Dalet on the ink, right? So let's say you're writing the word echad. You say Hashem echad, God is one, right? Echad means one, and you have three letters, aleph, ches, Dalet. The third letter is a Dalet. Now the Dalet looks like a bar on top, and then a line like that. So the end here is a little protrusion, right? So while I'm writing, a fly lands on this part right here, on this protrusion. Then the fly flies off and takes the ink. Now I have a resh. And what do you have? Hashem. If you take the letter echad and instead of a dalet you put a resh, it becomes achar and other. So instead of God is one, you have God. God forbid, it's the worst translation ever.
Yeah, and it can easily happen.
And it can easily happen because you missed that one little protrusion in the back of a dalet. She said, not only am I proficient in every single extra letter, but even the mechesh l'zvuv, even to be worried about one fly, the dilma asi perhaps will arrive, the yosef ataga the dalet, and will land on the protrusion of the dalet. Umachik le'am will erase it, umashiv le'esh, and return it into a resh.
How does he erase it?
So how do I prevent that from happening? Davar echad yeshli. I have a special ingredient. Shani matla toichadoy, which I put into the ink, the kankantum shmoy, and it's called kankantum. It's adhesive. And this is what he means when he says that I have this ingredient called kankantum. I'm so good at letters that I make sure nothing is erased, even the tiniest little protrusion. How do I do that? By adding this special thing with ink. So that just in case, while I'm writing, so I keep on writing, and the scroll is open, and the page before I wrote Hashem Echad, and the fly lands on it and flies away and removes that little protrusion, and now it turns into Acher, God forbid. So, and I don't even notice. So to be careful for that, I put the special adhesive so that even if a fly lands on it, it won't erase it. So don't worry, Rabbi Shmuel, about me missing letters back and forth. I'm extremely cautious about that, even to the point of worrying about the unlikelihood of a fly landing on my letters and ruining it. And that's the nature of the conversation.
It's an adhesive.
Hmm.
The fly would get stuck on it.
So I don't know if it's adhesive in that sense, but if a fly stuck on it, then I guess you pull it out. I don't know what he would do, but at least he would know.
No, it's an adhesive
To the paper, I think it's an adhesive of the ink to the paper. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if, yeah, that's a good point.
We never had to erase anything, it seems.
That-
We wouldn't be able to.
That's right. So this is the meaning of the conversation then between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel telling you to be careful, and Rabbi Meir saying, I'm so careful with every single extra letter that I'm even careful to get extra to make the ink stick, so that even the tiniest part of the letter shouldn't, God forbid, be erased, and that way change the meaning in a terrible way. So tomorrow, God willing.
What's that got to do with this?
So it's brought up here because Rabbi Shmuel responds to him and says, how could you put kankantum? How could you put the sulfite into the ink? It has to be erased because of the Sotah, right? So the Gemoro tomorrow is going to introduce another text, which seems to contradict the story, the narrative we just said today. And once the Gemara resolves that, the Gemara is going to get into when you should put this adhesive and when you should not. Meaning when you write the Torah, you should, so it doesn't get erased. But when you're writing a Sotah, you should not. And so that way it's erased. So we're going to get into that, God willing, tomorrow.
Do they use that ingredient or some similar ingredient?
So today, I believe so. So the laws of when you're allowed to erase and not erase is very complex. But if you did, it wouldn't be like you have to like scrape off on the bottom of the letter. It's a whole process. It doesn't just yeah. We talked about that in Menachos a little bit, yeah. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden.
Are there any
Sorry, yeah.
remnants of any of the Rabbi Meir's scripts?
I don't know. The best place to look is Rambam wrote a codex, right? Go look in the history of how Rambam got his codex. He talks about where he went,
Where he got his,
where he collected Torahs from different places. Look in the Rambam's laws of
it's in his Mishnah Torah.
in his Mishnah Torah, when he goes to the laws of writing a Sefer Torah, he gives a little brief history of how he researched to make sure when he describes, the spaces in the Torahs, the spaces in Torah,
The lines they make.
no, the empty spaces like between words, indicating the end of a paragraph or something.
Yes.
So he goes through the list of where and when these paragraphs were made, and he gives a little background as to where he researched to find out the correct places to put these spaces. So have a look there. Maybe there you'll get the reference to maybe the oldest recorded.
In a museum somewhere or something.
No. I'm saying look in the text of what he writes there.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So in
Is there any physical?
yeah, so in the Bible Land Museum in Israel, where they have the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, they have a codex there also that dates back to the Rambam's era. I'm not mistaken, that might be your best bet. Check online the Bible Land Museum and see what they have there. Pretty sure they have something from a very long time ago. The Bible Land Museum. It's right across from the Knesset in Jerusalem. Next time you're in Israel, definitely go visit that place. Very, very cool museum. I found it very interesting. Wait, no. Is that the Bible Land Museum? That's a different one. There's two museums there. Maybe I'm mixing up which one it is. The one that has the Dead Sea Scrolls, that one. I don't know if it's called the Bible Land Museum. That could be a different one. This one's called something else. It has a sculpture park as well. Like there's a small scale model of Jerusalem from the Second Temple period. You ever seen that? Which has a temple, like a made to scale model. It's maybe the size of this table. Maybe no. It's got to be. Might have seen the picture. Like it's got to be 10 times. Yeah. So they built a model of what Jerusalem looked like in the Second Temple period during Herod's time, the height of Herod's architectural achievements. So it's that same museum. And in there, they have the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's like a kind of dome where they have the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Now it's driving me crazy. 1 second. I'm going to check what the museum is called. Give me 1 second. Dead Sea Scrolls. Let's see where it's housed.
No, Sarah.
Let's see.
Sure.
Her father Left the museum.
Okay, it's called the Israel Museum.
Israel.
Bible Land Museum is a different one. So in the Israel Museum, where they have Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm quite sure they have a very old codex there. That might be a place to look. Go online, have a look.
Sarah Elgore's father